With Project Zomboid being as detailed as it is, it pays to learn the most efficient ways to progress, how to find a car, the best ways to acquire food, and the quickest ways to level skills, to name just a couple. Heck, that's half of my identity as a content creator, making guides to help people learn the best ways to do things to make their lives easier. That said, the quicker you learn, the less time it may take before you lose interest, even with the vast array of workshop mods available, because ultimately you're getting to the quote-unquote end quicker. With so much time between updates, even the biggest Zomboid enthusiasts may find they suffer with burnout eventually. So in this video, I'll be aiming to give some advice to those of you that feel they've experienced almost every avenue of Project Zomboid and are feeling a little bit weary. This is how you could find a new love for the game simply by adjusting your playstyle. So, what's the main difference to this method of play? Well, essentially we're going to be focusing on three things. Those are story, believability, and slowing down. Breaking this down into three main components helps me explain how you can replicate this sort of thing in your own playthroughs, and it helps you stay on track as you're playing. Now let's start with the story. This is probably the most customizable part of this experience. The emphasis here is setting your character, not yourself, some goals that tie into a bit of a backstory. Now, you don't have to go wild and develop a whole novel around who your character is, but to give you a place to start, think about your character's occupation, their spawn location, and their chosen traits. For example, let's say you're playing a police officer. Okay, then we'll say they missed the initial panic around the outbreak because they were out sick from work due to being prone to illness. Do they live alone? Or do they live with a partner? Do they have family? Just these couple of things alone can then play into our second major component, which is believability. The idea with this second pillar of this playthrough is to think as though you are in your character's shoes. If it helps, put yourself in that situation. If you had a family, wouldn't you want to check on them, find out where they are? And if you worked as a police officer in this instance, would you perhaps go down to the station to find out what's going on, or look for colleagues, weapons, or equipment? Again, this is just part of an example, but the main thing here is to play as though you are in your character's position, using the story you've built for them. If you're an office worker, maybe you'll choose to spawn at the top of the office block where you work. If you're a doctor, you might head to your clinic. Or if you decide your character has family, maybe you'll check the nearest hospital for them. You don't have to immediately push for these goals, but rather use your time to prepare for them and think about how you would choose to do that. We're not just rushing to the nearest supermarket and stocking up on loads of food or rushing to the nearest hardware store for weapons. We're going through that initial panic and acting as though we had real ties and connections that might change how we respond to an actual outbreak. That brings us to the last of the three segments you'll need to make this work, and really it's just as a result of the first two, and that's slowing down. This is our ultimate goal of creating a playthrough like this, and why it will end up significantly changing your outlook on how to play Project Zomboid. We're aiming to extend your playtime in what is otherwise an average playthrough, and mix in some new and exciting reasons to expand your horizon within the game also. Now, personally, if I'm playing just the average playthrough, I'm immediately looking for all the things I need for long-term survival, that being a car, a generator, weaponry, food stockpiles, you get the idea. In this sort of playthrough, however, we're prioritizing the reaction my character would have, and instead, we'll chase these goals down gradually and sometimes not at all until the very late stages of a game. By slowing our pace, we're extending the time that these core goals for a Project Zomboid playthrough are available to us, and I guess, ultimately, saving them for later. So now you know how this whole thing works, but you might be struggling to put together some goals for yourself. With that in mind, the next section of this video will essentially be some gameplay that myself and Lucy collected recently whilst exploring this very concept. As we go through, I'll give you some narrative, cover what was going through our heads in the moment to make the decisions we made, and ultimately, this should help you get in the mindset for your own playthroughs. This is playing Project Zomboid as if you were there. To set the scene, our characters started in a small, single-story house on the outskirts of Rosewood, a small town home to little but a few storefronts, the local police department, fire station, and Rosewood Elementary. Our survivors, hearing the growing unrest and panic situation in Louisville, decide to barricade their home and spend 2 days confined, as per the guidelines of various government safety alerts. Stay in your homes was the message, and these two have listened. At least for now. Thankfully, we were lucky enough to be given a book with some of the random items that spawned in our chosen safe house. We passed time as anyone would in this situation, watching news broadcasts for developments on the outbreak, cooking simple meals, perhaps disregarding the thought that we may need to ration later, eating together, and taking part in recreational activities like reading for distraction from the worsening isolation. After 2 days, our survivors finally buckle under the pressure and decide it may be worthwhile to check on their neighbors. In doing so, they have their first encounters with the infected, and realization sets in that it's much worse than the media suggests. Even here, in a relatively rural location, there are shambling corpses looking to sink their teeth in. So, let's pause for a moment. What would you do here? Forced to dispatch people you may well know and recognize from day-to-day life. The people that live next door. Well, in our story, we decided that our characters may well still have a sense of right and wrong at this stage, and the overbearing weight of their moral compass would be too much for them to just leave the corpses sitting in the sun to rot. For that reason, we wanted to use the shovel we had found when searching for our neighbors and give them a proper burial out of respect. You should already be able to see the way we were employing this change of mindset, taking action as if we ourselves were in the situation our characters found themselves in. But where to next? Well, we hadn't left home, and as such it made sense that we would still have our car. It was time to head out, but if you were making this move, where would you go first? Keep in mind that things have taken a turn for the worse, but you can still be in disbelief that something such as an outbreak of flesh-eating undead is actually happening. What would you do if you're truly honest with yourself? Well, it's obviously not the same answer for everyone, but I'd say a good handful of people would choose to seek out local law enforcement. So off we went, and for those of you that know Rosewood, you might actually be anticipating where this is going to go. We travelled to the station, and sure enough, the zombie hordes were out in force. Try as I might to find a quiet place to park up, there was no chance we were going to be able to stop safely, and as such, we assumed the police had been overrun in the area. So what's next? Well, having found that we were essentially going to have to take care of ourselves for at least a short while, whilst presumably the military gathers to retake and secure the area, we settled on stocking the pantry and fortifying our home. Across town was the local Gigamart, and thankfully it was a lot quieter than the area surrounding the police station. We were able to park up, fill our trunk with groceries, and headed home shortly after. We were able to get our supplies unloaded back home, but before long we found that home assailed by the undead once again, and this time it was in larger numbers. The practice we'd had so far came in handy with this encounter though, and we were able to beat them without sustaining as much of a scratch. Still tied to our ever-dwindling morals, our characters once again decided to bury the bodies, but with there being so many, this time it took the form of a mass grave, only lit by the headlights of our car, like in some murder mystery movie out in the woods. You can imagine how much this might make a person question if what they're doing is the right thing, and how much of a mental toll that must take on them. As I think anyone would in the same shoes, we took the opportunity to wash our hands clean of the dirty deeds, ate a meal together, and then turned in for a night of much needed rest. But what was next for our plucky little duo? Lucy and I discussed this at length, and we had some conflicting opinions on what we might do in this kind of situation, and I think that's important to mention here, because if we were having different opinions, you can imagine how heated that conversation might be for our survivors too. They might disagree on the next course of action as well, and with tensions running so high, it could be fair to say that this would make even more of an emotional impact. So, here were our options. Number 1, seek out the military. After all, if the law enforcement in the area had fallen and we'd heard so much about military intervention around Louisville, perhaps we could go looking for them in search of refuge. Number 2, stick to our original plan of barricading our home and stocking up. This is pretty close to a lot of the more traditional Project Zomboid playthroughs, but you've got to think, our characters could have lived here for years, and there's something to be said for the benefit of knowing your surroundings. Number 3, head to somewhere remote with what we'd managed to gather so far. This would be a journey, no doubt, but the prospect of locating ourselves somewhere we can wait for this whole thing to blow over with far less risk to life is an attractive prospect. It just means leaving home behind. What would you do here? Have a real think about your real life attachments. Do you have family in the area? Do you have a home? The real question is, what's important to you in this situation? For our characters, we agreed that above all else, our survival mattered most. And for that reason, we packed up the car and decided we were to make the perilous journey to a small, isolated lake house by West Point. It was a good job we made this choice when we did, too, because thanks to a well-timed gunshot in the distance, we found our home once again besieged. Lucy took off to lead some of the hordes away, and I doubled back to the car to make a drive-by pickup, and we were on our way towards our new home. It was no easy journey. The roads were littered with wandering corpses, and it was tricky at the best of times to avoid a collision. But despite wreckage in the road and the long distance, we made it without even needing so much as a stop along the way for gas. We had to ditch our vehicle just outside a patch of nearby woodland and walk to the lake house itself, then take care of who I can only assume was the previous owner, but once we were rewarded for our efforts with some fishing supplies, and it was going to be a big lifeline considering this new home had no fridge or freezer, meaning that we'd need to live off the land for a while. We took the opportunity to spend the next day scavenging local houses and battling the undead. We found a few handy materials and tools like a saw too, that would allow us to construct base defenses and help to set up for the future. We spent the nights by the fire reading more skill books to prepare ourselves and putting together meals from hand-caught fish and canned goods brought from our now abandoned home. All things considered, things were looking good, and we even started to put in place barricades and crop plots to really set ourselves up for the future. It wasn't long though before what was shaping up to be a dream was turned into a nightmare for our survivors. At this point in time, Lucy revealed she had been bitten during the escape from our original safe house, and with moments left to live, all I could do was watch it happen. Now, putting myself in my character's shoes one last time, I thought about how hard it could be to see this unfold in front of you, and how it could be even more difficult to put an end to someone who has been a big part of your existence. My character was not strong enough, and instead opted to trap Lucy's character inside the cabin before sealing the door and setting off into the unknown with nothing but despair to guide them.